The smell hits you before your flashlight does. Not dust. Not mildew. Something under that. Something your body recognizes before your brain has a name for it. You've opened 400 and some units in this job. Old furniture. Christmas decorations nobody came back for. Once, an entire dental office's worth of equipment, still in the boxes. You've never opened one that made the hair on your arms stand up before you'd taken 3 steps inside. You paid $620 for this unit 40 minutes ago. You didn't know what was inside it. Nobody ever does. That's the entire business model of storage unit auctions. You're buying a lockbox and betting the contents are worth more than what you paid. Tonight, you may have made the worst bet of your life. Here's how you got here. You've been doing this for 6 years. It's not glamorous. It's not the TV show version, with dramatic music every time somebody finds a guitar. Most units are junk. Most days you lose money. You do it because once or twice a year, a unit pays for the other 50, and because, if you're honest with yourself, you like not knowing what's behind the door until the second it opens. The facility manager reads the unit number off her clipboard. 114. Tenant defaulted 4 months ago. 90-day notice, no response. Opening bid is $50. 75, says a sharp-eyed woman beside him. You almost don't bid at all. There's nothing about this unit that jumps out. But something about the way the tarp is rolled, tight, deliberate, tied off at both ends instead of just draped over whatever's underneath, nags at you. People don't usually tie off a tarp that carefully unless they're hiding something they don't want falling open by accident. 200, you say? The crowd murmurs. A few bidders glance at each other. 250. 400, you say? That's more than you'd normally spend on a unit with no obvious high-value items. You're not sure why you keep raising your hand. Call it instinct, if you believe in that. Call it a bad decision, if you don't. 400, going once, going twice. 600, the older man says. 620, you say? Silence. Nobody raises. Sold, for $620. You've spent more on units with less inside them. This isn't a huge risk. But as you sign the paperwork and the facility manager hands you the new lock and key, you notice something you didn't catch during your 60 seconds. The tenant's name on the file. Randall Vance. Defaulted 4 months ago. No forwarding address. No response to certified mail. You don't know that name yet. By tonight, you will. Most auctioneers wait until they get everything home to really go through a unit. You don't. You like doing the first pass on site, under the work light, before you load anything into the truck. Partly because you've learned the hard way that some units have things you don't want sitting in your vehicle overnight. Box 1, nothing. Box 2, mostly the same. Kitchen items, a few picture frames with the photos removed, like whoever packed this specifically didn't want to leave images of people behind. That's odd, but not alarming. People clear out storage units for all kinds of reasons. Divorce, eviction, death in the family. Sometimes people just don't want reminders. You move to the rolled tarp in the back corner. You crouch down and begin untying the rope at one end. The rope is tied in a double knot, cinched tight. Whoever did this wanted it secure. You've untied a lot of tarps in this job. Most people just loop a rope over the top and call it done. This is different. This is careful. You pull the tarp back. It's not a body. Your heart is going so fast you almost don't process that fact for a full 3 seconds. It's a rolled-up section of carpet. Water-stained. And underneath it, wrapped in a plastic dry-cleaning bag, a woman's jacket, a purse, and a driver's license. The license shows a smiling woman in her late 20s. The name printed below reads, Melissa and Okafor. You don't recognize the name. Not yet. But you recognize the date on the license's issue stamp, and you recognize, with a slow cold feeling spreading through your chest, that this purse has been sitting in a locked storage unit for what looks like years, not months. Which means whoever defaulted on this unit 4 months ago wasn't the same person who put these items inside it. You pick up the purse. Inside, alongside a set of keys and a half-used pack of gum, is a folded newspaper clipping. You unfold it carefully. A grainy printed photo of the same woman from the license. A headline partially visible. Local woman missing, police seeking. You've lived in this city your whole life. You don't remember this headline. But the paper is yellowed enough that it's old. Years old, easily. You sit back on your heels in the middle of a storage unit you paid $620 for, holding a dead woman's driver's license, and you understand, all at once, that you are no longer standing inside a business transaction. You are standing inside a crime scene that somebody successfully hid for years. Your first instinct is to call the police right then from the storage facility. Your second, more careful instinct wins out. You photograph everything exactly as you found it. Note the unit number, note the tenant's name, and take it all home before deciding your next move. Not because you're trying to hide anything. Because you've watched enough of these situations go sideways to know that helpful citizen and person who touched evidence and complicated a case are one bad decision apart. You search the woman's name. Melissa and Okafor, 11 years. Melissa Okafor, 28 years old, reported missing by her sister after she failed to show up for a family dinner and stopped answering calls. Last seen leaving her job at a downtown insurance office. Case went cold within 6 months. No arrests. No leads. The kind of story that runs once, gets a few follow-up pieces over the next year, and then quietly disappears from local news the way most unsolved cases do. You search the tenant's name next. Randall Vance. Fewer results this time. A property records page, a decade-old business license for a company called Vance Logistics, Moving and Storage Solutions. And there it is. Randall Vance didn't just rent a storage unit. 11 years ago, he ran a moving and storage company. The kind of business that has legitimate, unremarkable access to empty units, unmonitored loading docks, and, critically, trucks that nobody questions when they're moving boxes at odd hours. If you wanted to make a person disappear and hide the evidence somewhere nobody would think to look, the moving company owner's own backroom storage unit is a genuinely smart place to do it. Nobody searches the businessman's own unit. Everyone assumes he's the one helping other people move, not the one with something to hide. You don't know yet whether Randall Vance killed Melissa Okafor, or whether he was hired to make her disappear, or whether he's simply the last link in a chain that leads somewhere else entirely. What you do know is that a man connected to an 11-year-old cold case defaulted on a storage unit 4 months ago, stopped answering certified mail, and left behind evidence that somebody, for 11 years, kept perfectly, carefully preserved. That's not the behavior of someone trying to destroy evidence. That's the behavior of someone keeping insurance. You pick up your phone to call the non-emergency police line. It rings twice before you notice a car idling outside your house, headlights off, parked directly across the street. You've lived on this block for 4 years. You know every car that belongs here. This one doesn't. 2 days later, you're sitting in a police interview room across from a tired-looking detective. His reading glasses are pushed up on his forehead. The car outside your house was gone by morning. You didn't get a plate number in the dark, and by the time you'd worked up the nerve to go check, it had already pulled away. You've spent 2 days telling yourself it was nothing, a neighbor's guest, a delivery driver checking an address. Anything except what your gut is telling you it was. You called the police the morning after you found the purse. It took 2 days to get a detective assigned, and this is that meeting. Walk me through it again, Detective Harlow says. You bought the unit not knowing what was inside. That's how storage auctions work, you say? You get 60 seconds to look, then you bid blind. And you didn't touch anything until you photographed it. Everything's time-stamped. I can send you the photos directly from my phone. Harlow leans back, rubbing his eyes. I remember this case. Melissa Okafor. I was a patrol officer when it happened. Not my case originally, but you don't forget the ones that go cold. Her sister used to come into the station every few months for years, asking if there'd been any movement. Eventually she stopped coming. I always figured that was worse than if she'd kept showing up angry. That detail lands harder than you expect it to. This isn't an abstract cold case file to you anymore. It's a sister who stopped coming to the police station because hope had finally run out. What happens to Randall Vance now? You ask. That depends on what we find, Harlow says. Storage unit contents alone don't convict anybody. A good defense attorney tears apart chain of custody arguments before you've finished your coffee. But if Vance ran a moving company with unsupervised access to units and trucks around the time she disappeared, and he's the one who happened to be storing her purse, her ID, and a piece of stained carpet for over a decade. That's not nothing, you say? No, it's not nothing. It's the first real lead this case has had in 11 years. Harlow slides a photograph across the table, a DMV photo of a man in his 50s, heavy set, unremarkable. That's Randall Vance. Current photo, 6 months old. Ever seen him? At the auction, around the facility, anywhere. You study the photo. No, never. Good. Keep it that way. I mean that. Don't go looking for him. Don't go asking around the storage facility about him. Don't post anything online about what you found. If he finds out a civilian is the one who uncovered this after 11 years of nothing, and he's guilty, he has every incentive in the world to make sure this doesn't go any further than your storage unit. That warning should be enough to make you leave this alone entirely. Hand it over. Let the professionals handle it. Go back to bidding on units full of Christmas decorations. It isn't enough. Not quite. Because that car outside your house 2 nights ago is still sitting in the back of your mind, and some part of you needs to know whether it means what you're afraid it means. One question, you say? If somebody already knows I found this, if somebody's already watching my house, is that something you can protect me from? Harlow's expression shifts. Not dismissive anymore. Concerned. Tell me about this car. Detective Harlow took the car sighting seriously enough to have a patrol unit swing by your street twice that night. Nothing showed up. No car. No sign of anyone. Which should have made you feel better. It didn't. Your phone buzzes on the table. An unknown number. You almost let it go to voicemail. You don't. You bought Unit 114 at auction. A calm, older, unhurried voice says, "I'm calling to see if we can work something out about what you found in it." Your blood goes cold. Nobody outside Detective Harlow's department knows exactly what was in that unit. The auction house doesn't know. Your neighbors don't know. Who is this? You ask, keeping your voice steady, though your hand grips the phone hard. Someone who spent 11 years making sure that unit stayed exactly the way it was. And now a stranger with a work light, and a truck has undone 11 years of very careful patience over $620. I'm not calling about taking anything back. What's done is done. I'm calling because you strike me as a practical person, and practical people understand that some knowledge is safer to forget than to keep. You found something that was never supposed to surface. The question now is whether you're the kind of person who lets that be the end of your involvement, or the kind of person who keeps pulling on a thread that's already gotten one person killed. That's the first time anyone has said, out loud, in a way that isn't a news headline or a case file, that Melissa Okafor is dead. Not missing. Not a cold case. Dead, stated as fact, by someone who sounds like they'd know. Are you Randall Vance? You ask. The line goes silent for 3 long seconds. Randall Vance is a name on a business license from 11 years ago. That's all he ever was to any of this. A name that was useful once and isn't anymore. You should be more concerned with who's still useful now. The line clicks dead. You sit there with the dead phone still pressed to your ear. Randall Vance isn't the man behind this. He might be nothing more than a name someone borrowed, a storage unit and a defunct moving company used as cover for somebody higher up the chain, somebody who's been protecting this secret for over a decade and clearly still has the resources and the patience to do it. Which means Detective Harlow isn't just reopening an 11-year-old cold case. He's about to find out it was never actually cold. It was managed. The next morning, you're back at the police station, sitting across from Harlow again. You've just finished telling him about the phone call. You said he specifically distanced himself from the Vance name. Harlow says, writing notes rapidly. Like he was clearing the account, not defending himself. That's exactly what it felt like, you say? Like Vance was a tool, not the person actually responsible. Then we might be looking at something bigger than one storage unit. If Vance's moving company was cover for hiding evidence, and somebody with real resources has been protecting this for 11 years, actively enough to still be watching a storage facility auction list in real time, that's not a lone killer covering his tracks. That's an organization with a reason to keep this buried. An organization, not a person. The word lands heavier than you expect. What kind of organization protects an 11-year-old murder that hard, you ask? Harlow pauses, choosing his words carefully. The kind that's been doing more than one of these. Melissa Okafor might not be the only name in a unit like that one. She might just be the one you happened to buy. That thought hadn't occurred to you until this exact second. That Unit 114 wasn't a single crime hidden in a single storage locker. It might be one file in a system built to make people disappear, quietly, permanently, and profitably, for over a decade, hiding in plain sight inside an industry where nobody ever asks what's actually inside the units they're bidding on. Your phone buzzes again on the table between you and Harlow. Both of you look down at it. The message reads, Unit 114 wasn't the only one. Ask the facility how many other tenants defaulted and never came back. Harlow's expression hardens into something between alarm and resolve. Don't respond to that, he says quietly. And don't go anywhere near that storage facility again without me. You came into this job buying boxes nobody wanted for prices nobody else would pay, hoping once or twice a year you'd find something worth more than what you spent. You just found out that some units aren't worth more money. They're worth someone's entire life. And apparently, you're not the only person who's ever opened one and found that out the hard way. Part 2. How many other units? If you want to find out how many other units are out there and who's really been running this, subscribe, because Part 2 drops this week. And if you'd bought that unit for $620, would you have kept digging, or would you have walked away the second you saw that tarp?